The light was low and bronze when Naya first saw the shape on the floodplain, a single, unmoving form half sunk in the gray-brown soup of the receding river. It could have been a boulder. But then the wind shifted, and the wind always tells. More than the eye, that wasn't rock, that was skin. And not just any skin, it was wrinkled and trembling and breathing. A baby elephant Dot. At first she thought it was injured, maybe hit by poachers, maybe caught in the mud and too weak to cry out. She raised her binoculars, slowly, as if any sudden movement would frighten the air itself. But then something strange happened. The calf, no older than a year, turned its head toward her, not frantically, not in fear, but with a kind of weary purpose. It didn't cry, didn't trumpet, didn't even shift its legs, it just stared. Behind her, the engine of the field truck was still ticking from the drive. Mosquitoes swirled in golden coils above the cracked windshield. She lowered the binoculars. The grass around her boots crackled underfoot, stiff and dry from weeks without rain. But the mud around the calf was different. Dark, wet, disturbed. Something had happened here. Something the little one wouldn't leave behind. Nia had spent 23 years in this reserve. She'd seen elephant herds sweep through valleys in silence so profound it made you believe in ghosts. She'd seen calves cry for mothers lost to fences, seen bulls collapse from old age with a dignity humans rarely allow themselves. But this was different. There was no herd, no sound, no movement. Just one calf refusing to move, guarding something hidden by the earth. She stepped closer, carefully picking her path along the dry ridges that skirted the soft basin. The air smelled of rain-soaked roots and something else beneath it, something metallic. The sort of smell that doesn't rise unless something is broken or bleeding. Still, the calf didn't move. Its breath was shallow, but steady. A low, rhythmic hiss like air slipping through tired lungs. Its ears twitched once, then fell still again. Every part of its body screamed exhaustion, but it didn't budge. There were drag marks near its hind legs, not the kind made by predators, but by something being pulled into the muck. Long furrows in the mud, now half filled with water, and there, just at the edge of the calf's shadow, a shape began to form beneath the surface, not fully visible, not quite rising. But something was there. A bird screamed high above the tree line. The calf flinched, then pressed itself lower, as if trying to cover whatever was hidden beneath it. Nia froze. Whatever it was guarding, it wasn't ready to let it go. Behind her, the radio crackled. She didn't answer. The wind had shifted again, and with it came a feeling she hadn't known in years. Dread, soft and slow, like water swelling. In the lungs, not fear of what she might find, but fear of what it meant that a calf this young had chosen to stand guard, alone, over the earth. She knelt slowly, one knee in the mud, close enough now to see the texture of the calf's skin, a lattice of fine cracks and caked silt. She spoke gently, barely above a whisper. "It's all right. I'm not here to move you." The calf blinked, not in understanding but in resignation. Naya reached forward with one hand, not to touch the elephant, but to dip her fingers into the mud beside it. The ground was warm, soft, saturated, and beneath the surface a curve, hard and smooth, not stone, not root. Something else. She didn't dig further, not yet. Something in the air told her not to. The calf shifted its weight, and exhaled through its trunk, a sound so faint it could have been mistaken for the wind. But in that sound was everything: grief, defiance, and the quiet, unfathomable instinct to stay. Naya stood slowly, the mud clinging to her knees like unanswered questions. Behind her, the sky had begun to darken, the sun now nothing more than a copper smear on the horizon. She didn't move, neither did the calf. The radio crackled again, more urgent this time. She let it speak to itself. For a moment the whole floodplain was silent. No birds, no insects, just the hush of the wind over waterlogged earth, and one small elephant, guarding what the world had already left behind. Something lay beneath the mud, and whatever it was, it had changed the rules. The calf didn't stir as Naya stepped back from the mud, her boots sinking slightly into the softened bank. She glanced toward the horizon. The last of the sun was vanishing behind the baobabs there, twisted arms now silhouettes against a violet sky. Night was coming, and with it, questions that couldn't wait till morning. She reached for the radio clipped to her belt but hesitated, her fingers brushing the worn plastic before pulling away. Protocol said she should report, call for backup, but what could she even say? That a calf was refusing to move because it might be guarding something buried. That there was something under the mud she hadn't touched yet, and wasn't sure. She should. Instead, she crouched again, not close enough to spook the calf, but within its sight. The animal's eyes were half-lidded now, not from sleep, but from something heavier, grief, or maybe something older than that. Duty, as if standing over this patch of earth wasn't a choice, but a sentence. Behind them, the trees groaned. Not wind, something heavier moving between the trunks. A branch snapped in the distance. Naya tensed, not because of what it might be, but because the calf didn't react. It didn't even lift its head, as if whatever waited in the shadows wasn't as important as what lay beneath its body. Naya rose slowly, scanning the edge of the floodplain. Nothing, just the sound of distant insects and the low gurgle of water, drawing back into the soil. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching, or waiting. She took a step forward, this time placing her hand gently on the calf's shoulder. The skin was rough, warm, and slick with a thin sheen of sweat. The calf didn't pull away, but its breath stuttered, as if unsure whether to accept the comfort or resist it. Naya whispered, "You're not alone. You don't have to do this alone." The calf blinked again, but the tension in its body didn't ease. Then, something shifted in the mud beside her boot, a ripple. Barely there, but the earth doesn't ripple unless something beneath it moves. Naya knelt instantly, brushing aside the loose topsoil, her fingers trembling despite the heat. At first nothing, just mud, root, whetstone. Then she felt it again, a curve, hard, unnatural. Her breath caught. She pressed her hand deeper and closed her fingers around it. Not a rock, not bone, something smoother. She tugged gently, and a glint broke the surface. Not white, not ivory, but something paler, softer, tissue, a tail, small, shriveled. Still Naya froze. Her hands sank into the earth beside it, clearing the mud with slow, reverent strokes. Another shape emerged, an ear folded tight against a skull. A trunk, limp and half-curled like a question never answered. A second calf. Dead. The calf beside her didn't move. Its body was tense now, legs locked, breath rising in short gasps. It hadn't come to mourn. It had come to guard. Nia felt the weight of it press into her chest, not just the loss, but the choice. This calf had stayed. Through the rain, through hunger, through whatever had taken its sibling's life. It had not left, not wandered. It had refused to go on. And now, night was coming. In the distance, the trees groaned again, louder this time. The calf flinched. A shape moved beyond the tree line. Slow, low, watching. Hyenas. Naya turned sharply, heart rising into her throat. Not many, 2, maybe 3, but they had seen the smell of death would have reached them long before the light faded. She stood quickly and moved to shield the calf's flank with her body. She had no weapon, no flare, not even a proper torch, just the dim beam of a headlamp in the truck and the bulk of her voice. But the hyenas didn't advance. Not yet. They watched, ears twitching, steps measured, calculating. They were waiting for something, a crack in the pattern. A moment of weakness. Behind her, the calf let out a sound, low, rumbling, barely audible, a warning, or a goodbye. Nia turned back. Its eyes were locked on hers now, wide, determined. She whispered again, this time not to comfort, but to plead. "You have to go." The calf shifted, one foot, then another. But it didn't move forward. It stepped over the body, placing itself between the dead and living, staring past her toward the tree line. And then it did something Naya couldn't have expected. It raised its trunk, not in fear, not in panic, but in challenge. A sound broke from it. Raw, trembling, but unmistakable, a trumpet. Not strong, not clear, but defiant. In the stillness that followed, the hyenas paused. One stepped forward, then stopped. The wind shifted. The scent of something older, blood, yes, but also memory, moved across the plain. The hyenas turned, disappearing into the brush as silently as they had come. Nia dropped to her knees. Her legs no longer carried questions, just awe. The calf turned its head, looked back once at the body in the mud, then slowly stepped away. But it didn't go far. It stood beside her now, waiting for what Naya couldn't say. Only that something had changed. And not just in the calf, something in her had changed. Too, something that wouldn't be buried with the body beneath the mud. The wind moved across the floodplain like breath over old wounds. Slow, steady, unsure if it meant to soothe or awaken. Naya stood motionless, eyes fixed on the calf who had not lifted its trunk nor blinked since she'd risen. Whatever lay beneath the mud had stolen something from it. Or perhaps the calf had given it willingly. That was the thing about elephants. They remembered, but they also chose what to carry. She moved a step back, careful not to splash the waterlogged ground. In the distance, the light was thinning, not fading so much as retreating behind a wall of gathering cloud. The world was holding its breath, and the longer the calf stayed silent, the more she realized this wasn't an accident. It was a vigil. Her boots found drier soil at the edge of the basin. She reached for her radio, thumbing the button twice before lifting it to her mouth. "I need 2 sets of gloves and a soft top. Bring the vet kit." "No stretcher yet," the reply crackled. "You found something?" "No, not yet." She paused, "But something's down there." She clipped the radio back on her belt without waiting for a response. Behind her, the air buzzed with insects stirred by the coming shift in pressure. The scent of rain had intensified, not sweet, but earthy, metallic, like rust awakening in the soil. The kind of scent that reminds you, nature doesn't clean, it remembers. The calf shifted, not to rise, but to press deeper. The movement revealed something more, a second shape, barely discernible beneath the muddied surface, smaller, broken, still, a soft curve protruding, not quite a tusk, not quite a limb, but unmistakably elephant. Naya crouched again, heart pulling hard behind her ribs. Twins were rare, rarer still for both to survive. And now she understood this wasn't a calf guarding the past, it was a sibling holding vigil. She didn't speak. Words would only crowd the space. Instead, she lowered her head, hands open at her knees, and watched. Calf's eyes weren't just tired, they were pleading. not for help, not even for understanding. Just for time. A flash of gray appeared through the tree line behind her, two figures moving with careful steps. Lena, the new vet, barely 30, eyes always too quick to fill, and Jonas, the tracker, older than the trucks they drove, with boots stitched so many times they'd forgotten what brand they once were. He didn't ask questions, just took in the scene, then looked to the sky. "Rain's coming," he said. Softly. Lena knelt beside Naya. "Is it yes?" Naya's voice cracked without raising. Lena's hand hovered over her kit. "We should uncover." "No," Jonas said. "Not yet." Even the calf turned its head slightly at the interruption, as if affirming the old man's instinct. They waited, not for the weather, not for orders, but for the moment to shift on its own. A low rumble began, distant thunder or perhaps something deeper. From within the earth itself, it moved through the ground, subtle as memory. The calf raised its trunk for the first time and let out a sound so quiet, so hoarse, it was barely sound at all. A broken exhale shaped like grief. Jonas took a slow step forward, knelt at the edge of the basin, and reached down. His fingers brushed the mud gently, as if waking a sleeping story. The calf didn't protest. Instead it lowered its head, not in fear, but as though it finally believed someone else might carry the memory to. Jonas withdrew something small, a torn sliver of ear, smooth and clean, no blood, no violence. Whatever had happened, it had been quiet, slow, and the calf had stayed. Not from confusion, but from choice. "There's no scent of predators," he murmured. "No bite. Could have been sickness. Maybe the rains caught them, or maybe..." He stopped, gaze flicking toward the horizon. Lena reached for a vial, but Naya touched her arm later. Behind them, the trees began to whisper, not from storm, not yet, but from something else. Movement, distant, purposeful. Nia stood quickly, eyes narrowing toward the far ridge. Three shapes, silent, watching. Elephants. Adults. They did not approach, they simply stood there, outlines barely more than shadows pressed against sky. One of them raised its trunk, a gesture not of alarm, but farewell. Then, without a sound, they turned and vanished into the trees. Nia didn't move, not even when the first drop of rain struck her shoulder. The floodplain had grown quieter than before, not still, not lifeless, but changed. The kind of quiet that comes only after something has been understood, not explained, not solved, just seen. She looked down once more at the calf, who now lay with eyes closed but body still taut. Sleep wouldn't come, not yet. The ground beneath them held more than memory. And tomorrow, it would begin to speak. The radio continued to murmur behind her, but Nia didn't move. The hush over the floodplain had become a presence of its own, a silence so deep it felt deliberate. The baby elephant hadn't shifted. Its small frame, still crouched low over the mud, trembled faintly with each breath, but its gaze remained fixed, unwavering, on the shape hidden beneath the surface. A thin skein of mist had begun to rise from the wet earth. It clung low to the ground, catching the last of the copper light and turning the basin into a mirror of the sky, dim, fractured, and uncertain. Nia stepped closer, her boots sinking slightly into the soft perimeter. The calf didn't react. It only blinked, slow and deliberate, as if each motion was now measured for cost. She knelt again, this time slower, her hand hovering once more above the slick mud. The hard curve she'd touched before still waited beneath the surface unmoved. A tusk, a limb, an elder perhaps, lost in the flash flood that had come unseasonably, early 3 nights ago. But if it was family, where were the others? Why would they leave this one behind? The calf let out a low rumbling sound, not a call, not even a protest, just a long exhale that trembled at the edges, like breath over the lip of an empty bottle. Nia froze. That sound, it wasn't just grief, it was keeping time, a ritual, the slow rhythm of refusal. And then, through the hush came the faintest, a shift in the mud. Not a movement of the earth, something deeper, a release of pressure, a trickle of dark water seeping upward through a hairline crack in the surface, just beside the calf's foreleg. Nia leaned forward and placed her hand on the ground. Warm, too warm, and still. She wasn't prepared for what she might find. Not entirely, but she'd been in enough bush funerals to know when something wanted to be remembered. She began to dig, gently, using her fingers more than her strength, working in silence. The calf didn't flinch. Instead, it leaned slightly to the side, as if allowing her closer, as if giving permission. What emerged first was not what she expected. A curve of flesh, too soft to be adult, an ear folded and caked in silt. Then, a line of ribs, still intact, rising from the earth like the keel of a sunken boat. A calf, another one. Younger, smaller, dead. Nia sat back, her breath caught between her teeth. The elephant she'd thought was alone had not been alone. Not truly. It had been standing vigil. Not for a mother, but for a sibling. She looked at the surviving calf again. It had turned away slightly now, as if the truth once revealed was no longer its burden to hold. But there was something else in its posture, a sagging, yes, but also release, not relief. Elephants don't grieve like we do. They stay until the memory is rooted deep enough to carry. A breeze moved through the tall reeds, lifting the mist just enough to offer a view of the horizon. Far off, near the tree line, three shapes moved, shadows at first, but then unmistakable. Elephants, adults, watching. They had not abandoned the calf. They had waited, but they had not come closer. Naya rose to her feet, every joint stiffed with cold and something older, a weight she hadn't carried since the drought of '08, when calves were found collapsed in gullies with mothers circling, until they couldn't circle anymore. She walked back toward the truck and reached for the radio base. "This is Delta 1. I need a containment perimeter and water supplies at Sector 7 floodplain. No trauma unit, no extraction. Yet copy." The voice had answered was surprised. "Copy. Any injuries?" Nia looked back once more. The calf had begun to rise slow, mud-caked legs stiff with fatigue. It turned, its ears slack, its back caked in a crust of dried earth, but its eyes were clear. "Waiting, no injuries," she said softly, "just grief." She clicked off the radio and leaned against the hood of the truck. The wind had picked up again, not sharp, but rising. A change was coming. She could feel it in the dust that now curled upward in tiny whirlwinds. Along the edge of the basin, behind her, the calf gave one last glance toward the mound of disturbed earth. Then, without a sound, it began to walk, not away from what it had guarded, but toward the figures now emerging from the distant trees. The herd was coming, but not rushing, not trumpeting, just approaching, slowly, as if even they understood. There was no need to hurry. What must be done with reverence. And then a sound, soft, brittle, from deeper within the reeds. Not elephant, not wind, something else. Nia turned her head, eyes narrowing as the rustle stilled. The story beneath the mud was not yet over. Nia didn't move. The reeds had stilled again, as if whatever made the sound had changed its mind. But the silence that followed wasn't hollow. It was full, saturated, the kind of silence that follows when something is finished becoming what it was always meant to be. She turned back toward the calf. I had stopped walking. Its feet were sunk slightly in the soft clay, its ears twitching in quiet recognition. Ahead, the herd had paused just at the edge of the tree line. One of the older females, tall, scarred across the flank, stepped forward first. She didn't trumpet, she didn't call. She only waited, trunk lowered, head slightly inclined, an invitation without expectation. The calf hesitated. It looked back once more toward the muddy hollow where its sibling now lay beneath a thin shroud of earth and grass, covered by Nia's hands in the slow, reverent ritual she'd learned from the field. Never fast, never loud, always with care. The calf's gaze lingered there for a moment longer, as though committing something final to memory. Then, without fanfare, it walked forward. Each step was unsteady, but deliberate. The herd made space as it came, not crowding, not touching, just being there. A circle formed, slowly, instinctively, and in the center of it, the calf lowered its head and rested, not in collapse, not in defeat, but in return. Nia exhaled. She hadn't realized she'd been holding her breath. Behind her, the truck clicked in the cooling dusk. The sun had slipped behind the acacia ridge, and the light left behind was pale and gold, catching in the edges of things in the bend of reeds, in the shine on the calf's back, in the moist earth shaped by footfalls. She walked once more, to the edge of the basin. There was nothing dramatic about the small grave, just a soft rise in the ground. The shape of it curved gently by the edge of an old river route. One trunk print nearby had hardened, half-sunk like a seal. The rest had already begun to fade beneath the breeze. For a long while Nia stood there, alone, no words, no radio, only the soft rhythm of distant breath and the deep pulse of something old, older than sorrow, older than memory, something like duty, something like love. As night fell, the herd moved again, slowly threading back toward the higher trees. The calf paused once beneath the low branches, looked out across the open floodplain, and then followed. Nia stayed a little longer. And when she finally turned to leave, she left no mark behind, only a single, small feather caught in the grass beside the grave. Fluttering once in the last breeze of the day, the mud would dry, the herd would move on, but somewhere beneath the silted earth, a story had been guarded, remembered, and let go, not with noise, but with silence, a silence that meant something.